Hi everybody, and to take an opportunity here to show my latest creation. This is my new mini pinball machine. I'm calling these Pinbabies. It's a new design. It's an update to my original over here that I made a couple videos about. Did a couple refinements in the overall design, made it a little bit easier to build, easier to work with. And I'm going to be making a couple of these. So just wanted to highlight some of the differences between the two machines and let you take a look at them. Now both of these are very similar in size. I based the dimensions off my original because it worked very well. They're about 30 inches tall from the base of the cabinet to the top of the back box, and I think the overall length was 26 inches. And it was mostly just based around the size of the monitor that's used for the playfield. Now this is my original machine that I built for myself. This one uses a 21.5 inch playfield screen. Obviously a Samsung, you can see there. Originally this one was meant to have the screen flip up. It's actually on a hinge mount that does come up out of there, and that's really the only way to access the inside of the machine, so that's why it's exposed around the edges. The new machine, I used a 24 inch screen, and it's a Dell Ultra Sharp 24 inch widescreen, so it's slightly bigger. It's not terribly noticeable difference in size, but it is a little bit bigger. Now because I have the trim actually over the edge of the screen, it's not so glaringly obvious that it's just a computer monitor sitting in there from a distance when you're looking at it. I mean, you can tell it's a screen, but it doesn't just jump out at you like there's a screen sitting in a box like this one. So that was one improvement I made. Another difference between the two cabinets is the arrangement of everything inside. Here on my original, I had a couple vent holes cut in the side for the fans. This would be the power supply, and this fan over on this end is right next to the CPU to help pull that air out from the inside of the cabinet. The new one just has one exhaust fan, and it's mounted in the back here on this back hatch panel, which I'll show you in a minute. And the intake for the power supply is actually underneath. There's just a hole cut in the bottom, and I didn't put any other guard over that. I didn't really feel it was needed. But that would be the intake for the power supply fan and really the whole machine. And then the exhaust is all vented out the back. Now another change that I made, this is the original machine, because everything was completely enclosed, both monitors, you had to get a way to access the controls. Like I said before, this one's on a hinge, this whole screen pops up. There's no other opening in the whole cabinet. And that includes for the back box, there was no way to actually get the monitor out once it was in there. So the top is removable on this one, and it will pop out the top. It's just on a mount against the back wall of that box. So the whole monitor will slide up out, and in the front, to get to the volume control, I have a removable panel here that's on magnets that covers up the speaker panel, and so you can get access there for the controls and the volume knob. And that just goes right back on. Now on the new machine, obviously that screen doesn't pop up. I just have a panel here with some speaker cloth over it covering that section of the monitor. These back glass monitors are actually the same. It has the speaker bar in there, and the back box is all one piece. This does not come off. Everything is accessed from this rear door. And this was the major design change that I decided on these cabinets, to make it just easier to load everything inside, to take it apart, to access everything when you need to, And it turns out the cabinet was actually easier to build in the first place when doing it this way. So we will open up this rear door, and there is everything ready to access. My little notes I wrote down there, I dated it Pinbaby number 1, because this is the first of this design. And there you can see how everything basically just slides in through the back. There's the monitor, slides into a mount that's inside there. We'll get showing you that. Here's just the speaker cover that's all attached. And the back glass monitor is just hanging on a mount on that rear door. So when you want to make any adjustments, you just open up the door and everything's right there for you. Other than the way that you access the internals, both cabinets are very similar size. The new one is a couple inches wider because of the wider playfield monitor. I added a little bit extra room there just so there was enough to make a good equal distance on both sides for the trim pieces. And you'll also see that the sides on this are solid. When I did the back box for this one, had to make it a little bit wider so that there was room for the monitor. So there's no trim on this one. The monitor just sat back in there. And I had to just make that a little bit wider so it would hold it. Being at this new machine overall was wide enough, I could just make one solid side. And I think that makes it look a little nicer. Everything's just more together, solid, one piece. Other minor difference, the buttons I used on this one, you can see I just used regular arcade buttons for the operating controls, the start button, the green button, and the exit red button. Everything else is the same. You have your regular flipper button and the nudge button. On the new machine, I have all lit buttons, and I went with that big round yellow one there for the plunger. And you'll also see on my old machine, I had this whole I/O panel that has USB port, speaker plugs, the power switch and reset switch are right on there, and they're covered up by that little door. I didn't go that route with the new one. That was just unnecessary, I felt. Doesn't really get used other than a power button. And I also had this little drawer on this one that I stick the little keyboard touchpad remote in, and I also keep a USB wireless internet adapter on there that I can plug in when I need to access the internet through this machine. I didn't use those on the new one. It would have been a lot of extra expense, extra work, and it just wasn't necessary. Instead, all this one has on the outside is down here, there is the power button that you can barely tell it's even there. And this machine is just configured to stand alone, doesn't have to be plugged into the internet, no wireless internet, no keyboard, mouse. Just turn it on and it plays pinball. Hit the button and it shuts down. Very easy to use, no extra stuff. And that was really the point. This was supposed to be a simple, small, half-scale pinball machine for anybody that could just fit this little machine in their house just to have fun with. And that's what this one's going to be doing. I'm going to be tearing this down, taking the screens out, taking the legs off, probably most of the internals coming out. And it is going to be leaving this weekend to Cleveland, Ohio, as a Father's Day gift for my uncle. Total surprise to him, but my aunt and my cousin who arranged this for him are very excited to see his reaction to it. He's been here visiting before and just had a ball playing my machine. He tried to buy it off of me for way more than I thought it was really worth, but I didn't want to sell it. So I said the next time I make one, or next time I feel like making a couple of these things, I'll make sure that he knows about it. Well, he never knew about it, but my aunt did and my cousin did. So we put one together for him. So he is getting the first of my new line of these, which I have the parts here to build a couple more. I have at least one more that is partially assembled right now. And then I have some plans and some extra materials to do 3 more. But it's just been a dream putting this one together compared to my old one. The overall plan that I worked out to assemble, get everything set up on this has worked great. So I'm just going to enjoy making a couple more of these for people that want to have a fun little pinball game in their home. Here's a look at the computer hardware that's inside. This is, as you can see, Pinbaby number 2. This is the second one. This is not my uncle's. That is sitting over there that I've been showing you. But it's identical. I got all the parts at the same time. It is, as you can see, MSI motherboard. It's a micro or mini ATX. It's not the really small one. It's the second smallest size, I guess that is. Just so I could fit it pretty compactly on this board. I have it mounted up to a 12 by 12 piece of plywood. It is an i3, Intel Core i3 processor. You don't need a very powerful processor for the pinball software. 8 gigs of RAM. There's the hard drive mounted. I actually considered using a solid state drive, but these couple first ones I was putting together for this new model, I guess you could say, I just wanted to make them inexpensive. And it really wouldn't be much more expensive to get a solid state drive these days. You can get one that's plenty sized for one of these systems for maybe $50. And it would considerably speed it up as far as boot times, load times. The graphics card is they're NVIDIA cards. They're GTX 750 Ti's that I used on these. Very affordable these days. Obviously, there's better cards out there, but the 750 or 750 Ti, I guess. I don't even know if they make a regular 750 anymore. Plenty of power for running these pinball. I'm still using Virtual Pinball software version 9.9, which was the most current release before there's a new version out there, version 10, which is a total revamp of the software, uses more 3D rendering, better graphics, better physics models, that kind of thing. So it's totally different, and it doesn't really need a very powerful computer yet, but I think going forward, when people start making more pinball tables using the new version, they'll put more effects, more 3D stuff in there that'll maybe need a more powerful video card. But for right now, even the 750 Ti on Visual Pinball version 9.9 is way more than is even necessary. It runs these great. But you can see how that's all mounted up there. That's more or less all that is inside that pinball cabinet sitting back there. And here's the screens that are going to be on the second one. Yes, I can't be playing pool too much when I'm building these because I do use the table. Old pool tables really come in handy for a lot of projects around the house. I will tell you that much. This is all set up, ready to go. Obviously, I don't have the iPack with the arcade controls plugged in. Just the keyboard and mouse here for now. But I can show you launching PinballX, which is still the software I'm using. And one of my other videos, I gave kind of a demonstration of that. Still the best as far as I'm concerned. But here is Pinbaby number 2 with its software. More or less a clone of number 1 that's sitting over there. Same number of tables. I have 103 loaded up in both of these right now. Went through a long list of tables, weeded out ones that I just wasn't crazy about. They didn't look all that great. Had some little issues. Some just weren't that much fun. Some didn't look that great. There's a lot of tables that are out there for Visual Pinball that really need an update. And now that we're moved on to Visual Pinball version 10, probably not going to be a whole lot of updates done to the version 9 tables. So I just was trying to find the ones that really do play the best. I have a whole list on a spreadsheet here that I went through, graded them all, rated them, and made some notes. And that's how I sorted down. So I got down to 103 tables that I feel work excellent. They all play very well. The artwork is good. There's no old grainy images, things like that. Some of these playfield and back glass displays just on the PinballX are just, some of them are lower quality screenshots, but the games themselves that I have loaded in here are all met my standards. I tried to set pretty high standards for the games that I wanted to make sure were in these for the people and friends and so forth that wanted me to build them a machine. And now comes the hard part. Gotta have to shut this off, stop playing around with it, and tear it down to make sure it's safe to transport to Cleveland, Ohio. All I'm really gonna do is I'm gonna remove the legs. I'll take the screens out. Open the door back here. We're going to remove the screens. And as I do that, I'll take a couple other videos showing all the steps for that. But it's actually a pretty simple process. And I'll have the screens removed, the legs off. I can sit this in the back of the car. Probably leave the power supply sitting inside there. Probably leave the CPU sitting inside there, the whole board with the whole computer mounted on it. They should be safe to haul around. I just wanted to take the screens out so they don't get jostled around that much. So we'll show you how everything breaks down. Now the first step in taking this apart, and more or less you just reverse this order that I'm going to be doing everything to put it back together. First step is on the PC down here, just go and unplug all these connections, because as you pull things out, the last thing you want is a cord getting stuck and ripping the entire unit out, because that's the important part. If that falls on the floor and breaks, your machine's done. So that's very important. Let's get everything unhooked, get the wires out of the way, and then we'll just slide this playfield monitor out. That is just sitting on that 2x4 back there on a Visa mount. And then we'll take a look at things after that's out of the way. Now that the playfield monitor is out of the way, you can get a better look at what's going on in here. We get a little more light in, a little more access. So there's the PC unit mounted on the plywood. I showed you the other one earlier. It might be in another video. For power, we have 3 things plugged in, 2 monitors and the PC power supply. So I just use one of these little power strips. It's actually on a piece of Velcro to keep it in place. And that is the power cord that runs out the back. I found these that have a pretty long power cord. It has a 6-foot cord. So as long as you put your machine pretty close to an outlet on the wall, shouldn't need any extension cord for it. My other machine just had a real small cord coming out the back. I had to use an extension cord, so that's why I tried to find a little bit longer ones. Now the fan that's mounted on the door, that's the exhaust fan for the whole system, that is plugged into the system fan on the motherboard. So that can be unplugged. Fan stays on the door. This entire unit can come out. What I also had to do to make sure that we can remove the PC from the box, I just spliced together a little plug in here on the power button, because it's pretty well just locked in place there. And instead of having to unplug that from the board every time, I just put a little plug there. That unplugs, get it out of the way. This goes to the motherboard on the jumpers in there for the power switch. So just with those couple of connections there, you can free up the motherboard and the whole PC unit. and that whole piece can come out. I think I'm just going to leave it in here for now because it sits in there pretty securely. I have a couple of rails in the back that it goes and pushes against that, and then slides in the side, so it locks in place pretty good. Now, since we have everything unplugged, the back glass monitor, which is just hanging on the door here, it's on another low profile Visa mount. This just picks right up off, and it can be stored someplace safe. It probably wouldn't go anywhere if we left it in, but again, just to be safe, we don't need this shaking around, so it's easy enough to take off. So we'll take that off and set it over with the playfield. Now, up in the front of the cabinet, now hopefully there'll be enough light getting in here to see, we have the iPack, which is the button interface board. Plugs in with the USB connection to the motherboard. More or less acts like a keyboard. I have that mounted on the cabinet itself because then if I want to remove the computer, I can leave this hanging on the wall of the cabinet, and I don't have to remove any of the wiring from all of those buttons. I think our view is going to be flipping around as I do this, but a lot of buttons in there, a lot of intricate work to be plugging those in and unplugging them. So we just unplug the USB from the iPack, whole thing slides out. And there you can just see the power supply is right here. I have a bracket bolted to it that's screwed into the floor of the cabinet. Keeps it from sliding around. So I'm going to leave this in place too for transport, because it's pretty secure as far as sliding. I don't think I could turn the cabinet on its side. These things are pretty heavy, and it's just in there with a bracket and a couple screws into the wood. But it should be safe to just ride in here as it is. I don't know if there's any electricians or engineers or electrical people that are going to cringe at me for this. But to light the LED buttons on the front of the cabinet, they're all running on 5 volts. I think some of the LEDs can actually run on 12, but the Nova Gem button here, which is the 25-cent credit button, that one's set up for 5 volts. I think the others are just generic LEDs that can run on either 5 or 12. Probably 12 would make them brighter, or like I did, I ran them all on a series here. 12 volts probably would have been better for running this whole series of lights. I have those 4 lights on one circuit, or, well, just on one loop of wire here, and I have the plunger button and the Nova Gem coin button on another one, and I gave each of them a plug so I can unplug them from the power supply if the power supply would ever need to be removed. And I have those spliced into one of our lines from the power supply, and you see they're coming off of the 5 volt, which is the red line. The yellow is 12 volts, and like I said, that would probably power them all, give them a little more juice, maybe make them a little bit brighter. But because the Nova Gem is on a 5 volt setup, what happens is, if I can find it, there's a resistor in the line for the Nova Gem, and it backs it down to 5 volts. And again, if there's any electricians or anybody watching this, I might be completely wrong on how this works, but if you run 12 volts through this, it's a resistor. The resistor is resisting the voltage, cutting that back to what the device wants. So you run 12 volts through this thing, it gets really hot. It's way over voltage, and it starts to practically melt this plastic. I've done it before. That's how I know that. So instead I run everything on 5 volts and it seems plenty bright. Back to these plugs. If I was taking this thing completely apart, everything out from the cabinet, I would unplug those. That leaves all the buttons hanging on the wall, unplugged. So the power supply could be removed. And the iPack unit would remain here. We unplug it through this USB cable from the PC. Then the PC board unit, that all can come out. Power supply can all come out. And we'd be left with just the cabinet with the buttons and the iPack riding on the side. Like I said before, there's just so many wires in there to worry about. I wanted to make sure that I could just leave that alone. This is a very small light board. It's not going to move around that much. You know, if I wanted to take this thing completely apart, if I had to turn the cabinet on its side for some reason, this can just go along for the ride. Same for all the buttons. They're just all plugged in, bolted on. They can stay there. So this is as far as I'm going to take it apart for now, for the car ride out to Cleveland to deliver this. The PC board should be perfectly safe riding in here. It doesn't really shake around. Obviously, if we would flip upside down and roll over or something like that, this thing would go flying, but if that happens, I got worse things to worry about. The power supply, it's going to stay where it is. It's bolted in. It won't slide around. It's heavy, but it won't slide anywhere. And I'm really going to leave that in place because the screws that bolted in are up here underneath this jumbo wires. It's kind of a pain to get in there with a screwdriver. So I just got to leave it as is. Solution to that for the next one's going to be I'm actually going to slot the bracket. So you can just loosen the screws, get in there with a screwdriver, loosen them up, slide this out, and remove it. Put it back in, slide it into place, tighten down the screws. So it'll be a little bit easier to get in and out there. So you have the screens out, have all the wires bundled up inside. Gotta shut the door, prop this up on a stand, take the legs off, and it should be ready to travel. And then when we get to putting it all back together, setting it up again, I'll clean up some of the wires, put some wire ties in there, and it'll be home and in place and ready to be played. And there you go. Legs are off. We can carry this out, put it in the car, and it should be good to go. Those are the legs right there I used. I really like using these hairpin style legs. You see these in a lot of vintage furniture or reclaimed materials that people make furniture out of. It's just a really simple design, easy to use, easy to make, not very expensive. Hit them with a coat of paint in whatever color you want, and just make a good table leg. I just have some black electrical tape stuck on the bottom to keep it from scratching the floor if it's sitting on a wood floor or on the concrete floor in my workshop, just to keep it from scratching. Same kind of legs as I used on this one. Like I said, very, very simple, very minimalist. Don't really notice them there. So that's why I used them again. But we'll get this taken out, and we will put it back together in its new home, and we'll probably take a little more video there, and maybe even get a little bit of video of it being played by its new owner. So thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully I'll get to make a few more of these and show some more video and have a little bit more fun with pinball. So have a good one, everybody.